Today I'm here with someone who I very much admire because this person is actually living the life that I would have liked to have for myself as well. All she does is surround herself with sports. She works with sport. She trains a lot. Malin and I will today deep dive into what it's like to be a strength and conditioning coach. In the 7 years since she graduated from her background with her master's in sports science, she's founded the Olympic lifting club El Barrio, with whom she won the 2024 championship in the Netherlands. She has trained several rowing teams, including the Delft University team. Delft University team is a very big university here in the Netherlands. And she has trained countless private clients. Thank you to the podcast, Malin.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah.
It's a very, very nice encounter in a new setting this time. So, very happy to be here.
We've never had such a professional conversation.
No, but we can probably get this to work too.
Yeah, just for everyone to get to know you a little bit better, especially on your sports side. I have a few quick-fire questions. So just some questions which require short answers.
Yes.
All right. Considering you're in strength and conditioning, cardio or weightlifting?
Weightlifting.
What's your favorite exercise?
What's my favorite exercise? The snatch.
The snatch. What's your best lift?
As in numbers, do you mean? As in
How do you define for yourself what's your best lift?
My best lift.
What's your most proud lift?
Or I feel like if we stay in weightlifting, I'm relatively good at snatching and worse at clean and jerking.
Okay. So how much do you snatch?
70.
For people who don't know what a snatch is, that's pulling the weight in one go above your head. All right. And then what's the most valuable thing you learned during your study in sports science?
What's the most valuable thing? That I didn't want to become a performance analyst. No, that I didn't want to become a performance analyst.
A performance analyst. I'll ask a few more questions about that later.
Yes.
And what is the best thing about being a strength and conditioning coach?
Best thing about being a strength and conditioning coach, in my opinion, is that my office is the gym. Clearly, writing programs for people, I also have to sit at a desk at home and work from a computer. But a lot of my work is working directly with athletes, with young people, with clients, getting to hear their stories, their struggles, but also being a part of celebrating their wins. So maybe, or even if it's only a small portion of the whole picture being the gym work that we do, working with sports, you're still a part of that little bit of success once things go well. When athletes get super happy and come and tell you like, wow, I did so well, or I got this time, or I PB'd this. That's just the best feeling. And then, so that's working with people, I would say, because I feel like that really suits me. It's something that I really found is something that makes me happy. And I can honestly say that I go to my work every day feeling happy and fulfilled. And that's what the athletes that I coach give.
I think that what you're saying there is very important because we spend so much time at work. So that's definitely something we should chase, that work is something that makes life enjoyable. That's honestly as well why I started this podcast, because I just want to explore what is out there.
What makes you the happiest? What job makes you?
Yeah, exactly. I think I found a job that makes me happy, but I definitely I want to know what makes other people happy. Last question before we go into what does it actually mean to be in strength and conditioning? What's the worst thing about being in strength and conditioning?
Okay, so the worst thing about being in strength and conditioning, I would say, is that in the beginning, when you start off, and also just in general, if you're working a lot with people, it's odd hours. So most people just throughout the week will do strength and conditioning if they're training for a sport, and then maybe have competitions in the weekend. So you're bound to that people usually train or either really early in the morning or after work, after school, after studying, and in the evening. So you get these days that are they start super early, and then you have this awkward gap in the middle where you try to be productive, as do some other work, but your days finish really late. And obviously, as you move on in your career, you can maybe divide your schedule a bit wiser, or you get the opportunity to maybe work a little bit less late or a little bit less early. So that's definitely one of the downsides. And also that even though it gives a lot to work with people, it can also sometimes be draining, because if you sit at a desk and maybe 3 of your colleagues come in and ask you for something during a day, and maybe you have to have one meeting, and let's say you have 8 hours of constant groups of athletes and they're asking you questions, you're having to demonstrate things, you're having to look for a bad posture, making sure they don't get injured and all this stuff. It's your responsibility on the work floor to be alert, because you're dealing with people's bodies and their physical well-being, or their not getting injured. So you have to be sharp the whole time. And then usually that at the end of a long day, that can cause you to be sort of drained, and you really have to be smart about ways to restore that energy to be able to do it day after day, day in and day out.
You mentioned two things actually that I would like to go into a bit later, especially the time management part, which let's get into that in a bit. Let's first, now that we know a bit more about you and know that snatch is your favorite exercise, very important piece of information. What does it actually mean to be a strength and conditioning coach? Everyone knows what a coach is at the gym, or maybe a fitness coach, but it might be good if you can explain what is the difference between someone who trains personal clients like a fitness coach and a strength and conditioning coach.
I can explain that, yeah. So in my day-to-day life, I actually do a little bit of both strength and conditioning and personal training. And I think maybe most people have trained with a personal trainer or might know what that entails. And so just to give you a little bit of an example, during a week when I train people as a personal trainer, it would be a really broad spectrum of clients with different goals, and usually surrounding just general health and fitness. And this can range from people wanting to lose weight, people that have been pregnant, or women that have been pregnant and want to get back in shape and feel more confident about themselves. It can be, I've coached one person who needed to be in a sort of Expedition Robinson program and needed to strengthen his body and gain size for this adventure he was about to go on, and he was going to lose weight in the process, or training clients that need to get in shape or want to get in shape for their wedding. And so I feel like you can get pretty much any type of goal in a personal training client, and then you can, as a personal trainer, obviously specify a certain niche that you're maybe the best wedding prep personal trainer and that people hire you specifically for that. But when we look at strength and conditioning, it usually focuses on aiding to help better the performance in athletes, either individual athletes. So individual athletes can work with you as a strength and conditioning coach because you have some individual sports, but it can also be enhancing the performance of a specific team. And the difference between a strength and conditioning coach and the way that you should work and think about the coaching process is that we work with the competitive season of the actual sports that the athlete or athletes play. So if you have rowing, judo, powerlifting even, and we'll get to why powerlifting is a little bit different to maybe other sports, or football, you usually have an off-season, pre-season, where a preparatory phase, an in-season. And depending on the sport, your competitive season is a really long league of playing games every weekend, for example. Or it can be a season where you have, just per sport, it might look a little bit different, or each competitive season of a sport just varies. And your job as a strength and conditioning coach is, together with the sports coaching staff, so the rowing coach or the judo coach that coaches the athlete on the mat in judo, or in the boat outside in rowing, or on the field in football, that together with them come up with a plan where the work they do in the gym to make them stronger, more powerful, more mobile, that fits in with the other trainings that they do besides the gym work that you're going to give them. So that you're not intervening and fatiguing them because you make them lift super heavy and then the next day they can't run properly and pass the ball anymore because they're
Which
tired.
sports have you coached so far on an athlete level?
On an athlete level. So I've worked a lot with development level and like young talent. So predominantly with rowing. I've worked with rowing for 5 or 6 years now. But besides that, I've worked with lacrosse. I've worked with an archer athlete, a young archer. I've worked with boxing, handball, runners, a skier, and the same principles of how to train in the gym and develop certain physical properties will come back across different sports, but you do have to approach certain parts of the season a bit differently. And so
how do you get your head around that? Because I can imagine each sport, as you mentioned, has maybe different seasons. We might have different type of staff surrounding them. Mm-hmm. So let's say you pick a completely new sport. Let's pick ice hockey. Just taking a completely random sport. How would a strength and conditioning athlete coach then approach it to figure out what do we need to do? Like, who would you talk to? How would you get a picture of everything?
So there's this concept in strength and conditioning, or concept. I don't know if you call it a concept. But you do basically, you have to do, or you should be able to do, a needs analysis within your sport. And a needs analysis pretty much means that you analyze the needs of the sport. It's very simple. It's what it sounds like. But it basically means that for yourself, you make a profile of what the sport requires in terms of what are the strength levels needed for the sport, power characteristics, how powerful does an athlete need to be, endurance measurements. And we're talking about levels of strength, endurance. So things you can measure, so that you can, in the process of training, analyze, are we tracking towards, if we start here with a certain level of an athlete, and we it's good to know that we want to get here eventually, you know, the level that's required to play at pro level. But even for a young athlete, just the benchmarks or the steps in between that you need to hit to maybe one day get to pro level. So if you know that, and this can go all the way down to flexibility tests, where we know that we need to be able to get in a certain hip position to be able to complete the rowing stroke, and that otherwise we're gonna load our backs incorrectly and probably get injured. So it's really looking at everything within the sport, seeing where we can have measurable data that we can work towards achieving with the athlete in the gym. And then per individual, you basically also need to try to come up with what their specific strengths and weaknesses are. So one person might already be really strong, but needs to work on their flexibility. Like they've already had a background in a lot of strength training or a lot of gym work. But if they would be able to get into some deeper positions, they would be able to transfer that force better in the boat, for example.
You just mentioned as well that there might be different people. How many people are in a rowing team?
This depends. You have different classes. So rowing is actually one of the sports where you also if we're looking at world championships, European championships and Olympics, you can win. There's a lot of medals to win because you've got the single scull boat. So that's just one person with two blades.
And it goes up to how many people in total?
8.
8. Okay. And then if let's say you're coaching a team of 8, is there one of 4? What are the numbers? There's one person. I guess there's 2 people in the different categories. If we just mention the numbers.
So there's a single sculler, and then there's the 8. And then there's also doubles, there's 4s, but then you have people who use, it's called sculling, and it's with 2 oars. And then you have sweep rowing, which is one person goes to the right with 1 oar, and one person goes to the left with 1 oar. Yeah. So you have, in the 8, it's never with 2 oars. It's always sweep, like one goes one way. So
if you coach a team of 8 people, because you also just mentioned they have very potential different weaknesses. You coach them all one-on-one. Is it always all of them at the same time?
So at the level that I coach the rowing athletes, not the issue is, but the thing very true to rowing is you come out of the summer and you start the sort of pre-season preparatory work, and everyone is aiming to get their fitness back up again from coming out of off season, getting their fitness back up again, getting their strength up again. And you rarely ever form the actual team or boat combination that you'll be in until sort of later on before the season. So you only actually start training with the combination of people that you're gonna race with later on. So it's not that we really coach that boat in the gym as a whole. They do that more on the water once the time is there. So it's more looking at what restrictions does this person have to perform well in the boat or to move a boat fast, and how can we improve that? Do they have the required strength level? Do they have the required mobility in ankles, hips, and upper back, for example?
And when you do all these things, where does all the work on your side happen? Because on one side, especially if I see your Instagram stories, it all looks like it's the glamorous side where you're actually in the gym, you're actually coaching them, you're telling them do this and that different. How much work happens behind the scenes when you're a strength and conditioning coach, and how much happens actually at the gym or at whichever location you train the...
Yeah, so that's a good question, because there's a lot of preparatory work that I don't show, or that I don't show. I don't show footage. I could start doing that if that's what the people want to see.
Pictures of you behind the laptop.
Me scratching my head and walking around thinking of exercise.
I expect you to have a standing desk though, because got to be healthy as
on a treadmill.
Yeah, that as well.
No, but you're absolutely right. There's also a lot of preparatory work that goes into prepping for certain training blocks. So going back to what does a strength and conditioning coach do? You look at the season of we need to compete and peak and be at our best at these events, and this is the main one that we're working towards. And then you kind of reverse engineer to the point where we are now, and then you come up with training blocks together with the sports coach of in this portion of the season in the gym where there's room to work on strength, and in this portion we're going to work on power, or in this portion this specific person is going to be able to work on gaining muscle. So then you need to sit down as a coach behind your laptop and either for the group make this training block, or for the individual make that specific training and think of how you're going to progress the exercise, the sets, the reps, the total volume and loading that they're going to be training, and things like the warming up, making sure that they are well warmed up before they do all their heavy hard lifting. What preventative sort of injury prevention exercises do you want them to be doing? Is it core work to be able to make sure that they can handle the actual loads of their sport? That's a big part of sort of maybe the less sexy exercises that are still really a big part of the program that we maybe show less.
Just quickly, can you tell me how important is warming up and prehab? Because I feel like especially prehab is a concept a lot of people don't hear about.
Yeah, prehab, you have obviously rehab once something's gone wrong and once you're injured. And prehab is, well, some people don't like it because it's kind of saying, okay, if I do this exercise, I will prevent an injury. And you cannot always predict that, because if you're eating shit and if you're eating bad,
you can swear. There's no problem. Just go ahead, swearing.
If you're eating poorly and have certain general habits that are just not up to standards, you can get injured even though you've been doing 10 different prehab drills, So, but it's prehab exercises, if we like to call them that. It's maybe some accessory exercises that will target muscle groups more specifically, or I'm trying to think of how I could say this best. When we've done the needs analysis, we'll maybe find that a certain sport has or exposes an athlete to become very imbalanced. Let's talk about rowing, and let's look at the fact that they do sculling with 2 oars, but also a lot of people, or almost all people who start rowing, start with 1 oar. And if you go and bend in and make a stroke to one side, everything's gonna get crooked in your hips, your back, everything. If you're applying a lot of force with your leg, and you're gonna give the leg drive a little bit imbalanced every drive, and do that for kilometers, for hours, for days on end, for weeks, months, and you don't do some stabilizing core work to kind of work against the imbalances that your sport is creating, then it's a question of time before you're gonna
So you have to
start to get injured.
So you have to focus on some form of longevity on the athlete.
Yes, because otherwise you're gonna. It's. So I've come across many different things. Some athletes are just very robust and don't get injured very quickly, and that's, I guess, something it's very lucky if you have that.
Would you
That
say
you can throw any exercise at them, and sometimes if they skip something or haven't trained for a while, or just looking at the total period that you've trained with them, they like never have any issues. And some, they're just more fragile. So I guess it also depends very much on the person, on the individual.
One last side question before we can go back a bit more into... Sorry, I took us on a tangent here. In terms of the being prone to injuries, if we take examples that a lot of people might know, like that someone like Ronaldo can play on a very high level until he's almost 40, compared to some of the star boys who get injured as soon as they're 24 and then they're constantly out again. Is that partially due to their strength and conditioning coach, or would you say that's also, or their programming, or is that oftentimes also just some form of genetics and how their body is built compared to others?
I think it's definitely a sort of marriage between all the factors that genetics plays a part. You can be very good or elite athlete at a certain sport, but if we look at these 10 different players, there's one person that's like truly found the sport that they were genetically meant to do, or that they have the capacity to be the best at, and that this fits them so well. For example, Ronaldo. But I mean, I've watched a fair bit of like documentaries and things, and this man, he has bikes at home and he has machines at home, and he is just meticulous about keeping his body in the best shape he can, and he just loves the game. And I guess there also you have a spectrum of athletes who love to compete but actually don't really like training that much, or will sometimes they love the process of competing and winning and are very result oriented or goal oriented. And some people that love the process, they just love training, and they also like competing and winning, but they love the process. I feel like Ronaldo, he's kind of a mix of both. Like, I mean, he gets into like fired up and gets emotional when it doesn't work, and he's very into, he wants to win obviously, but he also, I think, loves the process. He loves training.
Is that something a strength and conditioning coach also needs to do?
What, teach athletes? Or
like maybe if we go back to the what is a strength and conditioning coach? Actually, the question I have now, I'll ask that in a bit. Back to I took us on a very long tangent. I apologize here.
That's okay. We were going for that 2-hour podcast.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. That's up to 3. Okay, so you went through, you need to really do the whole analysis on what the needs are.
The needs analysis of the sport.
And then once you have the program prepared, how much freedom do you, as a strength and conditioning coach, have to create the whole program? Is there anyone who reviews it, like their trainer in their actual sport, or someone who works in the organization? Is there someone who's like, hey Malin, what is it do you need to come with a proposal, or do you have full freedom to just be like, I'm the expert?
If it's like, for example, at the university level or with the rowers that I coach, it's you usually have that there's a professional coach, a professional rowing coach that's in charge of like the whole program, and then you have student coaches that also coach the on-water trainings and the erg trainings. And you'll usually have that some of the more experienced coaches and the professional coach, they are ex-rowers themselves. So they've gone through the journey of the whole training process. They've trained in the boat themselves. They've done the hard erg trainings, but they've also done the gym training. And then depending on what kind of, there's differing levels in how much gym training experience the professional coach has. But I usually find that if I have meetings, for example, with those coaches, I mean, they sort of set the skeleton for me to build my blocks of strength work and gym work into. And they set the time of, okay, in this phase they need to only be able they need to have a 45-minute gym session, and another day they are allowed to have 1.5 hours or maybe 60 minutes. And they sort of say, well, on Wednesday we have a really hard boat training, so they're not allowed to be fatigued during that Wednesday training because we need to get effective training work done in the boat. So then I would, for example, maybe before that training, if we want them to build strength in a deadlift and in a squat or something like that, pick to not put heavy deadlifting in front of an important, just as an example, an important boat training where they're gonna be pushing hard and really be like stressing their bodies, and that if they can't get into good positions because they've got deadlift DOMs, that is not gonna get, it's not going to result into an efficient boat training.
Yeah. For people who are not too much into the material, DOMS is just
delayed onset of muscle soreness.
Yeah, so just being very sore too.
Yeah. But so there's definitely people that, or we sort of create that program together. Usually if something results in that it's too heavy for a group of athletes or for a certain person, we just keep in contact as coaches and be like, we realized they were maybe a bit too sore, or can this person do more core work because we're seeing that he's like slouching in the boat.
You get constant feedback.
You get, yeah, it should be not that you're off on two separate islands. Like, I'm the strength and conditioning coach and I make them lift and this and this and that. You're going to do a much better job for the whole group, and also for just going to get better results on the water if the teams work together properly.
All right, so you have to work a lot together with the actual trainer of the team. You mentioned earlier as well that, of course, they will have some form of experience themselves. How much, when it comes to a sport like rowing, how much do you need to reinvent the wheel when it comes to the strength and conditioning? How much does already exist, and how much do you change? And then also
knowledge, you mean, or just like how much variation is there in ways to train? Yeah,
exactly. Like, is there like, again, I come with a powerlifting background, and there's like 1,000 programs, but they're all very, very similar in their setup. Is it the same for rowing? So if someone comes new into the career of strength and conditioning specifically for rowing, or maybe any other sports, would you just suggest be like, hey, maybe just read up on what they do and then tweak it a little bit depending on the athlete? Or how much do you need to start from scratch?
I think it's very, very, very highly dependent on, like you said, the level they're at. Like, have they ever been to the gym? Because every year I get a new group of athletes, and they range from I've trained or I've fitness trained for 3 or 4 years with my friends and done a lot of benching, like these kind of guys. Yeah. And I have never seen a gym and I have never touched a dumbbell. Like these kind of, this can be in one group of people, this can be the range of levels. So you've got the level, then you've got how do they move, what is their anatomy, because rowers tend to have, if you're, let's say, built like a rower, and you have different builds, but you generally like to see that someone has long legs because it gives you an anatomical advantage in creating a stronger leg drive, long arms, and sometimes we tend to see long legs, short torso, and then long arms being a typical rower build. Doesn't mean that other body types can also generate a lot of power and row really fast, because if you look at the national team, there's different types of builds in rowers. But then also how they respond to a certain strength training program is going to vary a lot. Maybe later on in their rowing career, you realize once they've been in several strength blocks that maybe working at 85% of their max or certain levels is really hard for them, because they have more endurance fibers, muscle fibers. So you have to be able to have different approaches for the different people. And in rowing specifically, I feel like there's been, in different countries, different ways to approach the work that we do in the gym. So I know, for example, that I've coached an athlete who was a part of she rowed for the British national team, but she also had some roots in the French, or had been in the French rowing system, and or maybe some French rowers or rowing coaches will be listening, but she explained to me that in France, they have during the year that they either work in the gym, on maximal strength, so few reps, lifting very heavy, moving a lot of weight, and obviously you need to have a process getting into the ability to train that way. So you can't just roll in like as a 16-year-old or 18-year-old who's never been to a gym and start lifting 5x5 at a heavy intensity. Your body needs more preparatory work to get used to that. So it always starts with learning how to do certain movements in the gym and doing that for a long time. But she explained that it was either maximum strength or like getting really strong, or it was some insane muscular endurance circuit that took 1.5 hours and was like 70 reps of back squat and then 50 squat jumps and just 70, 50, 40 reps of everything, where you kind of trying to you're training endurance with weights, so like with low to medium weight, so it is more challenging than doing a body weight circuit. Some exercises were body weight exercises, but the question you have to ask yourself is, if we're already doing a lot of conditioning work in the boat and on ergs to build our engine and our aerobic capacity, why are we then using the gym, where we have the opportunity to develop other physical capacities that are going to improve our performance in rowing? Why do we go and do more endurance work in the gym?
So what I hear here is your job as a strength and conditioning athlete is to complement their training. And so they already do a lot of endurance work, and they do it very specific on devices and in the boats that they're actually their sports requires. One thing that could be an argument of why you would do circuit training or circuit endurance training in the gym as an endurance athlete is when you can't do your endurance work due to lack of equipment, or the weather is bad or whatever, and you happen to be close to a gym and you want to do circuit training to get your endurance work in, or if you want to develop speed in the contraction of your leg muscles and you want to focus on rhythm and consistency and efficiency, that, for example, if you're doing single leg step up jumps at a certain rhythm, at a certain pace, without the distraction of having to steer your boat, wind, water, because the sport of rowing is very dependent on the environmental factors, that doing a muscular endurance circuit in the gym may be beneficial because it's a very controlled environment. Like you can push the limit and really focus on consistency the gym. But I've tried that type of training with the rowers, but also realized that they already do so much endurance work that why should we be adding more of that when... We're getting very specific into as well training here. Maybe to round off what it means to be a strength and conditioning coach, whereafter I would like to go into how to become a strength and conditioning coach, and then some specialized training questions at the end. You hinted on in the quickfire questions that the thing you like the least about being a strength and conditioning coach are the times, because it can be very early morning, it can be very late nights. You have to kind of base your time around all the clients the people you work with. How do you manage your time? Like, or if someone would be completely new to it, what advice would you give younger Malin who's about to start her first strength and conditioning coach?
What advice would I give? To look at, the truth is, in the beginning you need to get groundwork done, you need to get experience, you need to see different people. And I feel like I'm at the point where what I've learned up to this point is, and what's giving me the sort of confidence I have today in what I do, is because I've spent those crazy hours working with many different people.
Sorry, my question was also specifically about the time management.
Time management. I would say set sort of boundaries for yourself in your timetable or your daily your agenda. That if you start really early, then maybe you don't end ridiculously late on a day. I've also then realized that it's perfectly okay that if we have a long day where there's starting early and ending early, then I need to have naps in the middle of the day, like a little baby, just to sounds weird, but to get through, but just to still make it enjoyable and still get that feeling of I'm happy doing this and it works, that it works for you. And sometimes also realizing, let's say you also do some personal training on the side, realizing that I used to think when I started off that if someone came and said that they could train on these and these and these hours and that's their preferred hours, that doesn't mean that
that's the only hours.
That's the only hours. And if they really want to train with you and you give like, sorry, but I'm only available at these times. Sometimes magically they're also available at those times.
So it's important for you to questions here. So one, I guess, is to understand your own value and that people will actually chase you. And knowing that they will chase you if you're good enough.
Yeah.
When it comes to setting boundaries, are these boundaries for yourself, as in after 8 o'clock, I will not do any kind of performance analysis or training preparation? Or is this boundaries to exactly what you mentioned here of saying, I'm sorry, but on Sundays, I don't take any clients because Sundays is a day of rest for myself?
Yeah. So, pretty much that. I set boundaries. There was one period where I realized that I just need the weekends off. Yeah. But the reality is that people also have time to train maybe on a Saturday but I've also had periods where I trained where I worked 7 days a week. Okay. And then even if I thought, but I'm only training 2 or 3 people and it's early in the morning, it's still not a free day. So that concept of thinking, but it's only it's a difference to be able to wake up during a day if you need it and really resting and sleeping till 10 or 9 and just getting up and chilling. Setting boundaries on what days you're working, not working. For example, now I work on a Saturday morning, but then my whole Wednesday morning is off. Yeah. Always.
And you showed up at 9.
Yes, I showed up at 9. But then I set the boundary of demanding from you that it be early in the morning so that I still could do something in the afternoon, because you originally came within the middle of the day and I was just like, nah. So that there I set a boundary, but also I obviously would not miss the chance to reconnect and have this fun moment with you.
Especially such a big and famous podcast.
Yeah.
Okay.
But setting boundaries, or back to on a daily basis, after sometimes I maybe come home and have worked long hours, coached a lot, and you need to factor in that me time. You need to be able to say, I will answer these texts the next workday in the morning.
I think that's what you're saying here is actually very important for any kind of job, because for me as well, Sundays, especially in the evening, I'm not going to meet any friends. I'm just going to have me time, because I know like I need that energy for the week. And I have a more 9 to 5 kind of job where I know I'll work Monday to Friday, Saturdays off as well. Now I'd also be very interested in, how do you become a strength and conditioning coach? Maybe first to go through what's your story? How did you become a strength and conditioning coach?
Okay, so we can start very early. I don't know, how early do you want me to start?
I mean, you can start with maybe...
I can talk very fast if you want to. No. I can start with little Malin.
Yeah, maybe little Malin.
Little Malin?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you've known me since I was medium Malin, doing a lot of sports. Yeah. But even as little Malin, I did a lot of sports. And maybe the reason why I never became like the best in a sport was because I did 1,000 different ones. I always wanted to do football, horse riding, ballet, swimming, judo. I wanted to do all of it and had to kind of manage how much I did. But this continued into high school days, when I realized that we could travel with sports for school, I was like, well, if I can be in football and in basketball and in different sports, then I can compete and this and that. And honestly, sports has always brought me so much joy. It's given me a sense of releasing energy. I love competing. I love winning. I love the process of the social aspect that it gives to me. And I think it was instilled by my parents sort of upon us. They were never forceful about, let's go and become the best athlete in the world and like pushy. But they did teach me and my brother from a young age that after school, one moves, one does a sport, one goes to an activity, and really pushed that into us. So that became just the most normal thing in the world to me. And then I guess from having done a lot of sports and also having pretty sporty parents, at some point you realize that you're maybe pretty good at certain things or have a skill of learning, picking up new things quickly. And you start to get more competitive. In high school, I would do stupid things like running the beep test for fun outside my house because I wanted to...
Wait, you did that for fun?
I did that for fun because I wanted to be able to be one of the last ones with the boys, you know? I was kind of a tomboy when I was in high school at times. I would dress up girly, maybe, or I like to dress up girly, but I also like to play football with the guys.
I actually think it's very impressive how I kind of see the tomboy thing you're saying in terms of your performance, but I would say personality and all of that.
I was girly.
So I find it, well, this is a bit of a tangent, so let's not go too much into it, but I thought you're a very impressive example of you can be extremely good at sport, but you don't necessarily have to fall into the category of tomboy. You still have, you still have a lot of your femininity around that. And I think that's very cool because I feel like we stereotype, or maybe I stereotype a lot in my head, and I feel like,
so that already, I was just always got to a point where in school there were certain subjects that I just didn't want to do anymore when we needed to graduate from high school, and that I just wanted to, I was looking forward to the end of the day where we could go to practice, you know. That was a big part of my high school, I found. And just that lunch break, even I would look forward to lunch break because then we could play football outside. During high school, I never really thought about what I wanted to work with and what I wanted to study when I went to university. It wasn't until it kind of everyone was pushing you to go to career day, pick subjects for university. And even then, I had picked subjects based on what I liked at that moment. I was not being pushed by my parents in the sense of pick something that's going to be able to make you become a doctor or pick something. So I picked subjects that I liked at the moment. And then when it came to the point that we needed to sign up for university, I was like, well, what can I do with this? And I like sports. And then I got into the thought that I wanted to become a physiotherapist because I had a pretty bad knee injury during my high school year. I walked on crutches. I tore my ACL and my meniscus and had sort of this moment of, I'm never gonna become the athlete that I wanted to be, because somewhere deep down it was my goal to be an athlete myself.
So what did you end up picking for your study?
I ended up, I wanted to get into physiotherapy, but I realized that I didn't have some of the subjects that I should have taken.
So for physio and strength and conditioning coach would be different?
Well, I ended up picking sports science, which was a path that could lead me into physiotherapy. But then when I started studying sports science, I realized that this is actually also pretty fun. And it's different to physiotherapy. And I just accidentally started doing sports science. I didn't even know that existed.
What is studying sports science? And maybe for people who don't know it, from the people you study with, what are all the type of different jobs you can get? Just short, just naming a few.
So in short, the different subjects you'll take and what you can actually become as a sports scientist is you can become a professional sports psychologist. You can become a biomechanist who works with forces acting on the body, joint angles. So think of a lab with like cameras that film a hockey person running with the stick and the ball and making a turn or hitting a ball, and then with high-speed motion cameras capturing the actual speed that the different parts of the body moves at, and you'll have maybe force plates in the ground that can collect data from how much pressure or how much forces are acting on the body when you do a fake or a turn or whatever. So a biomechanist analyzing how the body moves in certain sports. You can become a physiologist and physiologists are interested in what happens on the inside of the body when we do physical exercise. So think of the bike tests where they have the mask on and we're measuring how much oxygen the body is able to take in and use for performance. what happens to your lactate levels when we measuring things from the blood, from urine, from the things that happen on the inside, and then linking that to how can we perform better and stuff like that. You can become a performance analyst, which is what I did for my master's degree. You can become a strength and conditioning coach. So there's lots of different...
There's
tracks. A lot of different tracks that you can become as a sports scientist. And then also you can become an embedded sports scientist at a team or at a club or at a university. Or you become a research-based sports scientist in a lab, where your goal is to, if you like the academic side of things and you love writing papers and doing research, you become like a research-based sports scientist or an embedded scientist who reads the science that the person in the lab creates and tests to inform their practice with a team or at an athlete level. So either you work more, like both is hands-on, but the hands-onness is, are you working with the performance or are you working with collecting data on how certain principles work?
And you have both a bachelor's and a master's in this, right?
Yes.
And how did you then decide, well, from these countless amount of different jobs that I can get, I want to become a strength and conditioning coach?
Well, so this kind of stemmed from my very exciting time in Australia, all the way on the other side of the country, of the world. So I did my master degree in Australia, had the best time ever there. And I had the very great opportunity to be a part of the high performance football team of an Australian football team. And when we're talking Australian football, AFL, we're not talking soccer, like kicking the ball with your feet. We're not talking American football with the pigskin leather ball with all the padding and helmets and stuff. We're talking about Australian football, which is a sport of its own, the biggest sport in Australia. It's played on a cricket field or like an oval-sized field. And it has athletes that are short, fast, and quick midfielders, and it has athletes that are 2 meter tall people.
So very
broad range of athlete types, and it's basically a hybrid between football, like soccer, and rugby, because they have no padding, but they tackle, they jump on each other, and they can handball and kick this ball, and they need to have so much stamina because the field is really big. They're running a lot, but they also need to be they need to be buff,
powerful,
but not, no, they need to be well developed and robust because they need to be able to handle impact of tackles, but they can't be too stocky and too big. Like rugbyers are more sprinters, and it's a lot of stop start and like sprint and then rest and then sprint and then rest, and they can handle, or it's a lot more tackle heavy, so they need to be a lot bigger. Here I did my master thesis project. I worked together with another PhD student and another master student, and we did performance analysis. And this basically included filming all the trainings that were done during a week and filming or obtaining footage from match day games. And then we had to code all the skills that all the athletes did.
What does code mean? Because you explained that to me before at one point. It's not actually writing code. It's not
writing code like in the computer language. We also did do some coding of this sense to create the actual reports that we then sent to coaches. But we basically collected data in the form of, we had this software called Sports Code, where you can plug in the film that you filmed from practice. And then you build your own coding window where we have buttons of all the athletes. And let's say we had you and me, we have Sebastian and Malin, and I'm looking at the video and you pass the ball to me. Then I would have to click on your name, be like, Sebastian did a handball with his left hand and it went so many meters, and you have different meters options.
So a lot of small details to put in.
Yeah, for one skill. And imagine we're training for 1 hour or 1.5 hours. You were playing this video in like super, super, super slow speed and clicking maybe 12 actions for you doing one movement. Were you running? Were you standing still? Where on the field were you? And you had to click. And at one point, I think we did on the Excel sheet where all this data came into, I did some kind of sum equals of how many times we had clicked on the mouse. And I just realized this is not what I want to do with my life. Or I would see the players walk in, every day, and we did get to interact with the players. They would sometimes have to come and watch their video of what we're coding, of skills that went wrong or weren't efficient, and you'd get sort of like a video analysis thing with them. And I did get to do some other type of testing and be in some of the gym sessions, and that's kind of where the idea sparked of maybe I don't want to do this computer work that's so heavy, only this. I want to be more hands-on with interacting with athletes and things.
And then once you realize you want to be more hands-on, how did you get your first strength and conditioning coach job? Like how does someone then fresh out of uni get into it?
So I did an internship, and then out of that started to work with the teams that I work with now, but also I've also gotten opportunities through things like Instagram, through contacting people, through people I've met during training, talking about what you do, talking about what you want to do. Then you realize, I think it's important to put yourself out there and to, like, I'd say, network, and not just be going about your training and being with the people that you coach, but also if you train yourself and you talk to other people, you get yourself into places where they'll be like, oh, I heard that, or I know this person who trains these and these people, maybe you should get in contact with. And just like that, I've gotten a lot of
referrals,
word of mouth, and just people.
For the internship that you mentioned earlier, is that just the classical corporate way of going on LinkedIn, look for which open jobs are available, and then just apply?
Could do that, but also just emailing people, or looking how the system works. So I've also emailed with the Swedish national team sports science department, just looking up people and just emailing who you think might be someone who can help you, and not be afraid to reach out to people that are in the position that you want to be in.
If someone doesn't want to study sports science but still really wants to do strength and conditioning, what are other ways to prepare? Because I know for personal trainers in the gym, they have those 1, 2, or 3 months courses, which seem extremely short. Would you say that's sufficient to become what you are doing, of coaching like an athlete team in rowing or something else? Or would you say you definitely should go through the university route?
I think the issue there probably is with, I'm not saying that you shouldn't get into this if you really want to, but I think the issue is that there's less opportunities working with high level sports and athletes than we think, and there's more people studying it than there's jobs in that can, for example, fill your whole entire week at one and the same club. Because I'm always working at different places. And what's the question?
If there's another way to get into it,
another way to get into it. It obviously helps to be experienced in training yourself. If you want to get into strength and conditioning, I think people can be a good coach and coach people if they are coach in a business setting, or coaching groups is a skill that you can learn from maybe a course or a smaller than taking a whole coaching degree in university. But I feel like having experience as a strength and conditioning coach of certain training modalities yourself is almost crucial and super important, because you need to know what it feels like if you're assigning someone to do if you're assigning someone to train for hypertrophy, and you know that they need to muscle growth, taking their sets to failure. You need to be able to realize that someone is not taking their sets to failure or close to failure. And you need to know how painful that is yourself. Or it's useful too.
To answer the question, then, is there an alternative way to get in there? If someone goes on a 3 months personal trainer course, and then works his way up, works in the gym for a year, has had several clients, could they then start applying for a rowing team, be like, hey, I have experience in lowly training people on specific exercises, understanding their needs?
I guess it all comes down to, because I haven't walked that path myself, I I don't know how easy that would be, but I do think that you do get people who have a lot of experience in a certain sport. So they've done this sport themselves. So they know a lot of that aspect of it. And then they also go on to get a lot of experience themselves in the gym. And then because they understand the whole picture, they then are maybe let's say they work then in a gym and they get a few clients from the sport that they've also done themselves, and they then refer or are basically their business card or then they could probably get into one of those positions. But usually also, if you look at sort of the national level, and for example in Australia, they were super strict about you can't just come in from a different country with a personal training accreditation and expect
so you need accreditation of that country.
And it depends on the country. So you have certain courses that you can take in Australia. In Australia, they're very strict on their standards, and I feel like they have a very good system that regulates what professionals in strength and conditioning and working with athletes should know. But that's in that country specific.
Just maybe to make the answer a bit shorter, if I now want to become a strength and conditioning coach, should I, and let's say Australia, I don't live in Australia, I've never lived in Australia, would you say go in there, look at different vacancies, look at exactly what the criteria is, and then maybe try to fulfill them? So you mentioned that earlier as well, actually, when it comes to training, so kind of backtrack from looking what are the needs, and then just
exactly. That would probably be a good idea. And on the top of my head, you have this accreditation in Australia called the ASCA, the Australian Strength and Conditioning Association, and it has a level 1 course, level 2 course, level 3 course, and then you become like you're an elite trainer and or a lifetime coach. And it's a course that has heavy requirements, but I think at some point it also requires you to have a university degree. So then you kind of run into I can't get around. So for that, I think
but then we know how to get in there. So it's most likely university if you want to do it at a high level.
Most likely, but internships. Imagine you're an assistant, and you get into doing let's say you're a strength and conditioning coach at a very small team, and your role as a strength and conditioning coach or as a strength and conditioning assistant requires you to do way more tasks than you would maybe do as a strength and conditioning coach for a very big team. Then maybe if you're an assistant and you're also carrying the water bottles and you're also doing the warm-up drills for the field, or you're also doing all the stretching work or helping with that, then maybe after a lot of time of helping out, you get to see
you can work your way up.
And so doing an internship or just getting hours in of work is probably the way to go.
All right, from here I would like to segue actually into the last part of the podcast, because now we know to get into it, well, university will help a lot, or slowly get your experience and also look into the specific country you're in. What credentials do you need to get into that job? Now in the last segment, I would like to focus a bit more on a few more specific strength and conditioning coach skill sets, and maybe as well some training questions, maybe just for the last 20 minutes. What would you say are the most important skills of a strength and conditioning coach? Because you mentioned earlier as well, you need to work together with the actual trainer. So I can imagine there's a lot of soft skills, human interaction skills that you need. You mentioned as well, it's good to maybe have trained yourself. And you mentioned it's good to have experience at actually coaching people. Is there anything else that comes to mind? But also, how do you get these specific skill sets?
Yeah. So obviously you need to have knowledge. You need to know what you're doing. You need, and this is where the maybe your educational background comes in. So the combination of knowledge of the actual how to design a training program, how to train for different outcomes, periodization of a yearly plan for a sport, staying up to date with the current research, because maybe things change, we come with new information, gets discovered or gets researched, and you need to adapt to that, and the ability to stay on top of that is really important. And then your people skills is, I think, a very big must. You have different types of coaches with different types of styles, and so some people will enjoy a more authoritative coach who is very do this, do that, and some people might be better with a less authoritative coach. There's different coaching styles.
Are you saying as a coach maybe you should follow your own style, and then maybe as well your type of clientele will find you?
Yeah. I feel like also if you I should probably leave this for an answer for later. Being able to work with people is a big thing that I think maybe people underestimate if they, for example, come from sports science and they think they want to do strength and conditioning, but they don't realize how much of actually with people skills it requires. Because sometimes
how do you get those skills?
It's in you. No. you get those skills by training a lot of different people, and also realizing or looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, okay, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses. I, for a fact, have had clients that I've not matched with. I've had people that I've trained and that I've thought, oh man, why is this not working?
I can imagine it's also important to accept that you will not match with
everyone.
Right?
Yeah, of course. And that can sometimes be hard to deal with. Now that I've coached a lot of people, I'm quicker, or it's easier for me to say, I don't think this is a good match. Maybe you would fit up one of my colleagues better. If we're talking about, for example, individual personal training clients. You get that sometimes, that the match is just really important.
Did you say that? And actually I got my first psychologist maybe a 3/4 of a year ago. What they suggested and what I also did was I had like speed dates, 50 minutes, 30 minutes with different psychologists. And one or two of them as well just said like, yeah, maybe this is not my field of expertise. And sometimes I also felt it myself like, yeah, this is not the best click. And then I, in the end, very happy, chose the one I clicked with a lot. I assume it's kind of the same if you want to find a trainer.
Yes, definitely. I mean, I can make an example of when I did my first CrossFit training. I'd been injured and I'd recovered from my injury, and I was like, oh, what sport should I do now? And then I had been a fan watching the CrossFit games for like 4 or 5 years. And then I was kind of hesitant but excited to actually try it one time. And I went to a gym and I did like 2 to 3 trial classes, and it just, the vibe and what I had built up for it to be in my head and my expectations weren't really matched, or as in they weren't really it wasn't really like I expected it to be. And I was kind of disappointed, and I ended up like not going back there. And I thought, man, I really wanted this to work, but why was it not good? And then a few months later, weeks or months later, someone else in my network started or wanted to start with the sport, and I said something along the lines of, oh yeah, I tried, but I was kind of disappointed in how it turned out, but I'm open to trying again somewhere else. And then this person found a gym, and I went along for a trial class, and then I was hooked, and it was a great vibe. The environment, the people, everything was very different. And that's just, usually people might think, pick the first and best option that they see. So you need a psychologist, or you need a trainer, or you need a CrossFit gym, and you Google and you find 5 different options, and you're like, oh, this is closest to my house, this one has the most stars, and you might feel like going somewhere for an appointment and trying something out is already so many steps and hassle, or it's not just going and trying how good the cappuccino is. Like, it's a bigger commitment because you're there for an hour, for example. And you need to pay a decent amount of money usually.
Oh, yeah, that's a big
But
one.
that should be maybe almost a better motivator for you to try different things before you decide where you should spend your money. And you can almost always get a free trial class
in most places.
In most places. The thing is that people, when it comes to sports and when it comes to training and clients entering a gym, if it's with personal training, but also if it's an athlete wanting to achieve a certain goal, they've usually already set a certain goal in their head and they get to you with their goal. So they're ready to go. So they usually approach a trainer or a gym with the sort of, I want to start tomorrow. I want to get there. They're ready to go. And that's why they probably all usually go to a place. If it's
not
good enough, they go because they're ready to go. If they've decided, if it's someone who wants to lose weight and they've been in this stage that they're contemplating on starting, but they're not sure if they can do it quite yet. And then when they get into the mode of like actually taking action on starting, then it's like, I'm ready to go now. And then they'll maybe be less open to going to 5 different gyms because they want to start the process. They want to get this new habit going. Or if it's someone who wants to has a certain performance goal, they've already said, by that time I want to reach this, so I want to start tomorrow.
Maybe if you want a client, being available and being flexible is an important thing.
Yes, but also make it, or it's maybe a bit counterproductive to say, be sure to look around at other places to find your right match. That's maybe not the best selling point to say as a coach. But now, if we're not talking, I guess, now you're asking, how should you get more clients? I think then it becomes more sort of conversation strategies at an intake with a client and asking things like, what do you expect from me? Or finding out what their goals are. If the personality is a match, feeling that out, that's important to do. And in the beginning of your career, maybe you'll coach people and have to coach people that aren't the best match for you and that will stick around for a while and then
I guess you can learn a lot from that though.
You can learn a lot from that. I've had energy draining clients that if they came in the beginning of my day or at the end of the day, they ruined my whole day that was to come, or sort of ended my day on a bad note because of just everything being negative or something. And I just realized that I can't do that, or it's not good for me and my own energy.
One last skill set that I would like to go into before the end of the podcast is sports psychology.
Yeah.
Because now you mentioned the negative clients. Also very early on, you mentioned Ronaldo, for example, is just constantly on it and really wants to train.
I mean, I've never met Ronaldo, but
he gives that vibe very much. But yeah, and you also said you had that course in university. How much do you use the experience from sports psychology, and how do you constantly keep an athlete motivated? Because especially, if they're rowing, they want to be maybe on the water and they don't want to be in the gym and do your exercises, which make them a more complete athlete, but it's not very specialized.
I wouldn't say that sports psychology goes into whether they believe in the program or want to do your exercises. I think sports psychology has definitely played more of a role in my now professional career than I thought it was going to do. It was always a subject we had to take in my bachelor degree, in my master's degree. I had a lot of every year I had sports psychology in every part of the year pretty much. And I always found it really interesting. But I also always thought, I'm not going to become a sports psychologist and sit in an office and talk to athletes, which I now realize that in the gym sessions is a big part of, or becomes a big part of a strength and conditioning coach's role when you have these moments, maybe after training or before training even starts, or during training, which, for example, if we talk about my rowers, when you're in the boat and you're rowing on the water, there's not really room for getting into those conversations about what's going on in your life, finding out about their habits, their patterns of what they do in a day, finding out how what they're struggling with maybe something in their family or something that's hindering their performance. Because in the end of the day, the goal of a program with all their training is to improve performance. And then, at a university level, you maybe don't have a professionally employed sports psychologist for the team. And then automatically the role kind of falls on you or on me as a strength and conditioning coach, because athletes are very much more likely to tell me things they're struggling with, because they also know that I'm not making the selection for who goes in the A or the B boat. So it's much easier to maybe tell me things, confidential things, that they wouldn't maybe tell their rowing coach or the head coach, in fear of, if I tell that I'm struggling with this, then maybe they'll think that I'm not coping well and they'll put me in a lower boat. Sometimes they just need some advice in how to cope with a situation, or they have a dilemma.
Give a few examples of what are the things they might come with? Maybe just 1, 2, 3 examples.
Someone struggling with or a lot of issues, or not things we see throughout the season, is, for example, how to balance the study load that is at university with training 9 or 10 times a week, multiple times a day, and studying, doing a pretty intense degree. Where do you, sometimes it gets overwhelming. And you have to watch for them getting, that they're not coming in with a lack of sleep and still thinking they are going to go for like a PR, and make them think smartly about that and about their habits, and when to take the foot off the gas in a strength training that's not their main sport, and kind of managing that. But also there might be athletes that have a conflict in their boat, just with a clash of personalities, or this person said that, and this person said that, and it's a tension that's making the training in the boat go bad, but it's not spoken about during practice, because then you need to practice. But then they come and tell me about it, and then I say, then I have to be, because I'm working with younger people, you don't have to solve their problems for them, but you can teach them how to act around a certain situation, and that they need to take responsibility for their own training, their own performance, and resolving issues rather than walking around and making them bigger. So or athletes that want to be given a certain chance, and they feel like they're kind of being put to the background, and that they're not being able to show their true performance, or that they're scared about being selected for a different boat or not, the stress that comes along with that. And also even a big thing with sports psychology that is something that athletes tend to get help for in all types of sports is performance anxiety and stress on game day, the mental talk that you have with yourself during a race, of if in a rowing race it gets really, really, really tough, sort of midway and the third quarter of a race, if you have issues with what you're telling yourself in your mind of, others are probably faster than I can't do this, it's so heavy, positive versus negative self-talk, and practicing and doing preparatory work outside of training and racing. So say when you're tired and it's painful and you're racing and maybe you're falling behind or whatever, if you haven't practiced this in a setting outside of the sport, of what you say to yourself, then it's going to be really hard for you to switch to a positive and drive way of talking to
Where do you have these conversations with them? Is it during the training?
During the training. The thing is, there's not, sometimes if it's an athlete that also has the capacity to reach a certain level, then we'll maybe schedule an individual meeting on the side. But usually we also use the sessions when they're training to just go through certain things. Maybe write down a to-do list for them of you now need to speak to this person, you need to call this coach, you could maybe look at it this way.
So you help them structure how to get the answer. It's, as we said, you don't solve the problem for them, but you help them get some kind of structure.
Or think about their problem in a different way, which sometimes helps and sometimes doesn't. But usually you find, if I think back of what I knew when I was 18 and the way I thought when I was 18 or 19, man, what did I know? Or maybe if you think back to what you...
Yeah, like honestly, going to a psychologist is one of the best decisions I've ever made. And I see that similar to my question earlier with Prehab. Like, I don't think you need to go to a psychologist just because you feel like something's wrong with you. It's also just to really constantly understand what's going on and help you be on the highest level possible.
One thing that I'm actually working with a certain athlete with, you have this thing called time trials where you row and you row 2 kilometers and you start at different intervals and people just row as fast as they can for 2 kilometers and they're not racing next to anyone. So you're not actually racing and seeing, oh, he's in front of me or he's behind me.
Yeah.
You just have to row as fast as you can. And then at the end, everyone has rowed as fast as they can after each other. And then times come out. But if you knew, for example, that you were going faster or slower, then you might like push a bit harder or chill a bit, but it's a time trial, so you don't know. And there's this athlete, and she's been in the sport for long enough where she has this fear with the national championships and the time trials to qualify you into heats for that race. But she's usually really good at time trials, in training, in practice, and all that stuff. But at that national team time trial, when she doesn't know where she's at compared to the rest, and she's not in control of the situation, she's had, I think, 3 years of all other time trials always going really good in any other setting, and only on this competition, the time trial goes bad.
So how do you handle that?
And then we can conclude, you kind of need to make, first of all, it's making the athlete realize that it's not down to their physical ability, preparation, their physical capacity, their ability to race. Because as soon as we step out to the time trial, then makes you go into this quarterfinal, this one, and then you also have this thing called repechage, which means you have to do like in Dutch, herkansing. Okay, so like a retry to still get into one of the rounds. But that means you've then rode an extra race compared to the rest. More fatigue. So you get into when she gets into one of the further rounds, her performance and racing next to people is then fine. So it's not down to the physical.
So as long as she sees a competitor next to her, she's fine.
Then it's fine. She's able to race and everything. But it's that insecurity about when it's hard in the time trial and she can't see what time she's at compared to the rest. Things start happening in her mind. So
I can imagine that's very hard.
First of all, and then because it's the most important race of the year, it like creates a block. And she even described it as 2 weeks ahead of the race of the national championships, then wanting to quit, wanting to not do it, having escapism thoughts, which is, so this year it's her last year rowing. So we're trying to make her realize that it's not due to your physical preparation, ability, capacity, your training, your preparation. You have to do some mental training and some mental work or some psychological exercises and view that bit and convince her that is the issue, let's say. And
is that then you doing that and giving her the exercises, or is that you then saying, okay, maybe you should go to a specialized psychologist?
Yeah, she's been to a psychologist before, and then I feel like that was for something else, for a different aspect of something she was working on. But it can be a bit of both. It can be whatever the athlete kind of wants.
So see what they're comfortable with.
See what they're comfortable with. And I always then have some exercises that are useful for anyone to do. Yeah. It would be literally useful for anyone to write down, to try to really think of, okay, what do I tell myself during a race? Or what do you tell yourself before you're going to lift something that you know is super heavy? Lift takes a couple of seconds to complete. A rowing race takes 7 something,
There's
maybe
a lot
8
more time
minutes.
To be in your
You're
head.
Thinking a lot. Yeah. You're thinking every stroke. About, oh, that was a good stroke. Oh, that was a bad stroke. Oh, that was another bad stroke. I've had 2 bad strokes. Oh, am I gonna get back? You can work yourself into a downward spiral pretty quickly if you're not strong.
So what? Just to conclude this whole story. So what's the way of solving this? Is like what is maybe one method?
Treating your mental, also having mental training, and treating that as a training that you need to have somewhere in your week. if it's an issue for you. You have some people that don't struggle with performance anxiety, or maybe everyone gets nervous before competition, and some will cope better. Some just have it in them, or some have maybe practiced already before with how to cope with stress and manage emotions during race day and stuff. But if you feel and you've realized that it is significantly detrimental to your performance, then you should maybe look at adding mental training or psychological training and doing exercises or consulting a psychologist and seeing that as just a training like your rowing training, your strength training, your other work that you do, and realizing that actually training your brain to change your thoughts from negative to positive and
is part of your
I
performance.
can do this instead of, oh, I don't think I can do this, is something that can really play a big part and maybe even be the crucial part to performing at your best. And for this athlete, for example, it's at the end of the rowing career, let's say, and we've just identified that the mental thing is the last thing in the way, and it just keeps occurring, and we see a pattern over years. So why don't we now focus on this?
Her last race is still to come?
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't know the
we
outcome
don't
yet.
know the outcome yet. So that's a fun case scenario.
One last question, because we're coming up in time here. I thought about this now that you were mentioning all the as well, but she doesn't know where she stands. So I don't know if you know an answer to this question, but when it's in a sport like racing or maybe football, is there any science that shows it's easier or harder to be ahead or behind in a race? Because sometimes, like, I played a bit of F1 or go-karting, and I think I prefer chasing someone over having someone behind me and chasing and trying to be faster than them. Is there any science that supports most people find one easier over the other?
I can tell you that I have not recently read deeply into the science of this particular matter, but it's a very interesting question. And I think if I just, so don't quote or don't state this then as being true or backed up by science, but I think that if we think of who is he called? Max Verstappen.
Yeah.
Who's very used to
F1 driver.
Yeah, who's very used to being ahead, but probably also likes to chase, likes the
He's really great at overtaking.
Yeah. I think I might have a sort of, I don't know in my brain if it's going to give you the answer, but I had this team of rowers who went to an English rowing race called the Henley on the Thames. It's one of the most prestigious rowing race in the UK. You have the Oxford-Cambridge battle, but you also have the Henley, which is just everyone dresses up in hats and fancy clothes and goes and watches. Just like watching horse races, they watch the rowing races, and it's everyone wants to win there. You have different cups, and they came as a Dutch crew with some guys that had rowed together the whole season, and I think one or two that kind of stepped in and they trained a bit before they went to this competition, but not for very long. So they had to develop a certain race strategy. And one of the guys was maybe a bit more insecure about, are we going to perform well if we haven't trained this much together and stuff? So what they did is they went through and sort of mentally prepared for every possible scenario that could happen. So if imagine we start hard and we're out of the blocks first, and then breaking down the race and all the different things that could happen during the race, and then thinking about, okay, what are we gonna think collectively as a crew if we're behind from the start, if we're ahead, if we're in the middle of the race and we're side by side and it's side by side until the end. How are we gonna act? So I feel like the thing you were explaining is a feeling of, I'm chasing someone, and it's giving me more power to drive.
I think what you're saying there is actually really interesting, and also really cool that you prepare for all that, because whilst we were talking, I just realized as well that I think the reason I don't like being chased is because in my head it's all about fear of losing. I'm already winning. I'm losing something that I don't have.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'm behind,
You have nothing to lose.
I have nothing to lose.
Yeah.
And I can get that insane dopamine rush of being like, so I think it's really smart to be aware of that.
And it's sometimes, I mean, how bad is it the winning for a long time and then losing at the end, or being third at the Olympic, or being at the Olympics or at anything in the top 3 position and then ending up going fourth.
That must be so hard.
Or something similar, that you're in a place where you almost already have it, and then you lose it. So it's also a reason why, if you're the best, people think, but he's the best, so it's not that hard for that person to be the best because they are the best. But you have that chasing feeling of people coming after you, who maybe have nothing to lose, and you have being the best to lose. So you still having to work hard.
I feel like we just got to a gem here. I really like what you said there, because I think that it can be useful in so many parts of your life. Just think about all the different scenarios and how to handle that. With this said, I think we've had a lot of valuable information coming up. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for being on the podcast, Malin.
No worries.
It was a pleasure speaking to you and picking your brain.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, you made it to the end of the episode. Before you leave, can you please do me this one simple favor and subscribe to the podcast? It's your free and easy way to show your support for all the hard work we put into every single episode, as well as help us reach more people and get new guests onto the show. Thank you for listening to the Untold Paths podcast.